The last thing my mother said to me that day, she said through the open window of a moving car, "Let's see if she can find her way back." She sang it. That is the detail people never believe when I tell this story. She didn't shout it or spit it. She sang it, the way you'd sing the last line of a song everyone at the party knows. And my father honked the horn twice in rhythm, like applause, and the car rolled out of the gravel lot of a train station I had never seen before, in a town whose name I had to read off the building. Millbrook Junction, 60 miles from home. My brother Dylan had his arm out the back window, holding his phone up, filming. I remember thinking, in the strange flat way you think things when your body hasn't caught up to what is happening, that he was holding it sideways. Landscape mode. He wanted it to look good. The car reached the end of the access road, paused at the stop sign longer than it needed to, a last little flourish, and turned toward the highway. The sound of the engine faded into the sound of wind moving through the corn on the far side of the tracks. And then it was just me, a parking lot with 4 cars in it, in a sky to the west that was turning the color of a fresh bruise. I stood there for a long time. I want to be honest about that part because everything that came after gets called cold and calculated and heartless, and I have learned not to argue with people who need those words. But I stood in that gravel lot for what must have been 10 full minutes doing absolutely nothing while the first thin rain started to come down. Not crying, just standing, taking inventory the way you do after a fall before you know if anything is broken. My phone was in the cup holder of my father's car, where my mother had told me to put it so I would be present for once. My purse was in the trunk in the cooler bag, because Dylan had needed the back seat space for the wedding gift we'd picked up for my cousin. My jacket was folded on top of the purse. I had the clothes I was wearing, a dress with no pockets, and a paper bracelet from the anniversary lunch we had just left, because that was the joke, you see. We were on the way home from celebrating 35 years of my parents' marriage, and somebody, I never found out which one of them, had spotted the sign for the station and decided it would be hilarious. I found out later it had been planned for a week. There was a group chat. My aunt was in it. Behind me, a voice said, "Honey, is someone coming back for you?" There was a woman on the bench under the platform awning. Late 50s, maybe 60. Cardigan, canvas tote bag, paperback folded over her knee. She had been watching the whole thing, the singing, the horn, the phone held sideways, and her face had the carefully neutral expression of a person who has decided not to pretend she didn't see what she saw. "No," I said. And it was the first time I had ever said it out loud about my family, in any form, and it came out of me so easily that something in my chest moved sideways. "No, I don't think anyone is coming back." She nodded slowly, like I had confirmed a diagnosis. "There's one more train east tonight," she said. 7:40. You can use my phone if you need to call someone. Her name was Pauline Mercer. I will tell you more about her later, because she matters. But right then she was a stranger holding out an old phone with a cracked screen protector. And I took it, and I stood under the awning with the rain getting serious on the tin roof. And I discovered something about myself. I knew 3 phone numbers by heart. My parents' landline, which had been the same since I was 6 years old. Dylan's cell, because it was 1 digit off from mine. And the customer service line of my own bank, because I am a bookkeeper, and I had called it perhaps 200 times over the years, for clients, for wire confirmations, for stop payments. I dialed the bank. I can still hear the woman on the line. Her name was Renata. She was working the evening desk, and she had the bright, slightly tired voice of someone 3 hours into a shift. She asked how she could help me today. "I'd like to cancel some scheduled transfers," I said. "Recurring ones. I have the account numbers." And I did. From memory. The mortgage draft that went out on the 1st of every month, the auto loan payment on the 5th, the insurance premiums, house and both cars, quarterly, next one due October 9th. I gave her the numbers, standing on a concrete platform in the rain, in a dress with no pockets, while somewhere on the highway, my family laughed themselves to tears about how lost I was. Renata read each one back to me. She asked the security questions, my mother's maiden name, which I almost laughed at. And then she said the sentence I have thought about every day since. "Just to confirm, ma'am, after today, no further payments will go out from your account to any of these. Is that what you want?" The rain was coming down hard now, silver where the platform lights caught it. Out past the tracks, the corn was moving in long waves, and the sky had gone fully dark in the west, and I was cold and 33 years old and 60 miles from a house that my own money had been quietly holding up for 5 years. "Yes," I said. "That's what I want." I handed Pauline back her phone. I thanked her. She looked at me for a moment and then out at the rain, and she didn't ask me a single question. That was the whole revenge, if you want to call it that. One phone call, 11 minutes, made before my family had even gotten back to the county line. No lawyer, no scene, no screaming match at a holiday table. They wanted to see if I could find my way back. But the truth none of them knew yet, was that I was the only one of us who had ever known where home actually stood, because I was the one paying for it. To understand what that phone call actually did, you have to understand who I was in that family and who I was outside of it, because those were two different women, and only one of them was real. Outside of it, I was Mara Whitfield, and I had a one-room office above Hagen's Hardware on Main Street with my name on the door in gold letters I had paid for myself. I am a bookkeeper. I keep the financial records of 22 small businesses, a hardware store, 2 restaurants, a plumbing contractor, a dental practice, a funeral home. I reconcile their accounts to the penny. I file their quarterlies on time, every time. In 6 years of running my own practice, I have never missed a deadline, never lost a client, and never once been surprised by a number, because numbers do not surprise you if you actually look at them. People are surprised by numbers the way they are surprised by January. It comes every year, friends. It was always coming. My oldest client is a man named Carl Brennan, who owns the plumbing company and is the closest thing this story has to a wise man. Carl is 58, built like a fire hydrant, and he interviewed me for 45 minutes when I first went out on my own, asking me hard questions about depreciation while drinking coffee from a mug shaped like a toilet. At the end, he hired me, and years later, he told me why. 22 years, I had an accountant I didn't trust, he said. 6 with you, I sleep like a baby. You know what you are? You're load-bearing. Most people are decoration. Load-bearing. I want you to hold on to that word, because Carl saw in one interview what my own family never saw in 3 decades. My days had a shape I had built on purpose: office by 7:30, ledgers in the morning when my head was sharpest, client calls after lunch. I ran on routine and black coffee and the deep, unfashionable satisfaction of making things balance. My apartment was small and paid for and quiet. 4 rooms over on Delancey Street with a kitchen window that caught the afternoon light. And I had built that quiet the way you build anything that lasts, slowly, on schedule, without an audience. And in the bottom drawer of my desk at that office, behind the client files, there was one folder that had no business name on the tab. It just said Whitfield. Inside it were 5 years of bank statements with certain lines highlighted in yellow. The 1st of the month, the 5th of the month, quarterly on the 9th. I kept that folder the way I keep everything, complete and current and accurate, and I had never shown it to a living soul. Not to Carl, not to a boyfriend. Certainly not to the people whose lives were written in it, line by line, $1,900 at a time. Now. Inside the family, I was someone else entirely. Inside the family, I was the punchline that arrived before the joke. I was the fun police. I was the human spreadsheet. I was the answer to the question, what's the opposite of Dylan? You have to picture a Whitfield family dinner to understand the physics of it. My mother Janet at one end of the table conducting, my father Russell at the other end, laughing at whatever was offered to him, because my father's whole emotional vocabulary was laughing at what the family put in front of him. And in the middle, shining, my brother Dylan, 4 years younger than me, beautiful in the way that makes teachers and bosses and loan officers forgive things, telling a story with his hands. Dylan told stories. That was his job at the table, and as far as I could ever determine, his job on earth. And the stories were genuinely funny. That is the part that makes families like mine so hard to explain. The laughter was real. The warmth in that room was real. It just had a border, and I lived outside it. I was in the stories, of course. As material, the time Mara brought a calculator to Christmas, the time Mara asked the waiter to split the check by what people actually ordered. Mara, who irons her jeans. Mara, who has never been late, and never been drunk, and never been interesting. My mother would laugh and say, "Where did we get her?" like I was a sofa that had been delivered to the wrong address. And I would smile every time. For 30 years, I smiled. I learned that smile the way other kids learn to ride bikes. Wobbling at first, then automatic, then so natural that nobody, including me, could remember a time before it. Last summer, a few months before the train station, there was a dinner like that. Dylan was telling the story of a fishing trip that ended with my father falling out of a canoe, and the room was warm and golden and roaring, and my mother had tears of laughter in her eyes. And I looked around that table and did the thing I had trained myself never to do. I did the math, the table they were laughing at, the roof over the laughter, the lights making it golden, the insurance keeping it all from being one bad storm away from nothing. And me, the human spreadsheet, the only person in the room who knew what the punchline cost per month, because I was the one paying it. In my family, there were two kinds of people, the ones who shined and the ones who paid the light bill. After dinner, I washed the dishes alone, the way I always did, listening to them laugh in the other room. I remember my hands in the warm water. I remember thinking that the dish soap was the brand I liked because I had bought it the last time I was there, the way I quietly bought 100 small things in that house, and nobody had ever once asked where any of it came from. The laughter went on without me. It always could. That was the thing I knew, and they didn't. So could I. People always want to know how it started, as if there was a morning the family woke up and voted on it. It doesn't work like that. Nobody decides the quiet kid will carry the luggage. It just happens one bag at a time, and by the time anyone notices, carrying it is simply who you are. I was born in 1992, 4 years before Dylan, and I have exactly one memory of being the center of that family. I was 5, and I had saved the change from my school milk money in a peanut butter jar for a year, and at Christmas I bought my mother a ceramic bird from the drugstore. She cried. She put it on the windowsill over the sink. For one whole evening, I was the headline. Then Dylan was born, and Dylan was the kind of baby strangers stopped to look at, and the family found its son. I am not bitter about that, or at least I have worked hard not to be. Some people walk into a room, and the room gets brighter. My brother is one of them. The problem was never that they loved him. The problem was that somewhere along the way, the family decided there was only so much sunlight to go around, and that I had been built to grow in the shade. Report cards tell the story better than I can. Dylan's came home with C's and the same sentence every year, such a joy to have in class, and my mother put them on the refrigerator. Mine came home with A's, and nobody could ever quite find a magnet. When I won the regional math contest in 8th grade, my father's whole reaction, complete and entire, was to ask whether they gave out money for that. When Dylan came in 3rd, in a talent show the same spring, we went out for pizza. You learn the exchange rate early in a family like mine. His charm converted to everything, my competence converted to nothing. So I stopped trying to convert it. I did my homework and I ironed my clothes, and I became, in the family's telling, the dull one, the careful one, the girl whose whole personality was a filing cabinet. Carefulness, when nobody values it, gets renamed. They called it boring. Years later, 22 small businesses would call it the only reason they survived an audit, but at that dinner table, it was just boring. I left for the state college in 2010, came back with an accounting degree in 2014, and took a desk at a regional firm 2 towns over. 4 years after that, I hung my own name on a door. If my parents ever told anyone about it, I never heard. My mother introduced me at a neighbor's barbecue that summer as Armara. She does taxes. I had 11 clients by then. By the train station, I had 22. She never learned the difference between a tax preparer and what I do, because the difference was not funny, and things that were not funny did not survive in that house. Then came November of 2019. My father was 56 years old and had spent 30 years at the same distribution company, running a warehouse floor, and they let him go on a Tuesday with a cardboard box and 4 months of severance. He sat at the kitchen table that whole winter, doing arithmetic with a pencil, and the arithmetic did not work. I knew it did not work because the arithmetic was my profession, and I could read the numbers upside down from across the table, the way other people read headlines. That autumn, his chest seized up while he was shoveling the driveway. It was not a heart attack in the end. It was what the doctors call a warning, which is a word doctors use when they want to charge you for fear. But I stood in that emergency room hallway and I watched my father, who I had never seen sit still in my life, lying gray and small under a thin blanket with wires coming off him. And I watched my mother whisper to my aunt about the mortgage when she thought no one could hear. Not whispering about his heart, about the mortgage. I understood, standing there, that fear in my family had a $sign on it, and that nobody else in that hallway could do anything about it. My father looked small in that hospital bed. It was the only time I ever saw him afraid. And I have thought since that some of that fear was not about dying. It was about being found out, about the family seeing that the man at the head of the table could not cover the table anymore. So in March of 2020, I sat at my kitchen table on Delancey Street at 1 o'clock in the morning with 3 account numbers and a cup of cold coffee, and I built the scaffolding, a standing transfer to cover the mortgage on the 1st of every month, the payment on my mother's car on the 5th, the insurance premiums, house and both vehicles quarterly. I routed them so the money simply appeared where it needed to be before it was needed. The way I would set it up for a client, clean and automatic and silent. I decided that night that the easiest gift I could give them was never having to ask. That was my mistake. And I want to be honest about it. Because I have had a long time to study it, I told myself I was protecting my father's dignity. And I was. But dignity that is protected in secret does not cost anyone anything, and people do not value what costs them nothing. I know that now. I am a bookkeeper. I should have known it then. There was exactly one conversation about it, ever. My mother caught the first transfer on a statement and called me, and her voice had something in it I had never heard before. Something balanced between gratitude and embarrassment, and for about 40 seconds I had a mother who knew what I was worth. Then the embarrassment won, the way it always won in that house, and she ended the conversation with the sentence that would run my life for the next 5 years. "We'll call it a little help," she said. "No need to make it a thing." A little help. $1,900 a month on average for 5 years was a little help. And because it was little, it could be forgotten. And because it was never a thing, it never needed to be thanked. The transfers ran in the dark like a furnace, and like a furnace, nobody thought about them at all until the day the house went cold. You want to know what those 5 years looked like? They looked like this. My father got some part-time work and his color back, and the family table got loud again. And the story the family told itself was that the Whitfields had weathered a rough patch. Weathered it. Like weather, the money had simply happened. And Dylan, those same 5 years, perfected his act. My brother borrowed money the way other people tell jokes, in front of an audience, for applause. He would put his hand on my father's shoulder at a barbecue and say, "Dad, I'm a little short this month." And my father, who was 61 years old, and not short that month, for one reason on this earth, would peel bills off a clip like a big man, and the cousins would laugh, and Dylan would kiss the top of his head. He never paid a cent of it back. I know the figure exactly, because I know every figure exactly. I watched my own money pass through my father's hands into my brother's pocket to the sound of applause, and I smiled, because smiling was my job at that table. The jokes about me got sharper in those years, too, and I have wondered since whether that was a coincidence. I don't think it was. I think, somewhere underneath everything, my parents knew. Not the number. They never let themselves see the number. But they knew the floor under them was someone else's work, and it is hard to be grateful through a window, looking at a person who has seen you afraid. It is much easier to make her the punchline. Contempt is what some families use instead of thank you, because thank you costs too much. My last birthday before the train station, my parents gave me a card. My mother had signed it for both of them, the way she had for years. Happy birthday from Mom and Dad, in her looping hand, and under it nothing. No memory, no line, no joke even. I stood in my kitchen holding a card that could have been bought for a coworker from 2 people whose roof I had been holding over their heads for 1,825 days, give or take. And I want you to understand that I was not angry. I had not earned anger yet. I was still doing the thing I had always done, the family math, where whatever they gave was enough because asking for more would make it a thing. 5 months later, they drove away from a train platform singing, and the math changed. The 740 East was 4 cars long and mostly empty, and Pauline Mercer would not let me board it until she had bought my ticket. I tried to argue. I stood at that little window with no purse and no phone and argued with a stranger about money, which, if you knew me, is the least surprising sentence in this whole story. She put one hand on my arm and told the man behind the glass, 1, for the young lady, and that was the end of the discussion. While we waited, she bought 2 coffees from the vending machine, the kind that taste like hot paper, and we drank them under the awning without saying much of anything. And it was, I remember thinking, the most peaceful 20 minutes I had spent in the company of another person in years. I made her give me her address. I told her it was so I could mail back what the ticket cost. And that was true. But it was also a bookkeeper's instinct. You record what you owe. My family never understood that the records I keep go both directions. The train came, and she squeezed my hand once, and I got on. I sat by the window with my coffee going cold and watched an hour of dark fields go by, towns whose names I never learned, grain elevators lit up like castles. And somewhere in that hour, the thing I had done at the platform settled into me. There was no triumph in it. I want to be clear about that because the version of this story people want has me grinning out a train window like a movie villain, and the truth is I mostly felt tired. The kind of tired that is 5 years old. Somewhere between 2 small towns whose names I never learned, I stopped being the family safety net. They just didn't know it yet. Nothing about the world looked different. The fields were the same fields. That is the strange thing about the biggest decisions. The big ones are quiet. It is only the small ones, what to say at dinner, whether to smile, that make any noise. I walked the last mile home from the station in town because I had no cab fare, in a dress with no pockets, and I was in my apartment with the deadbolt turned by 10:30. At 11 minutes past midnight, headlights swung across my kitchen ceiling. I stood in the dark and looked down at the parking lot, and there was my father's car, idling crooked across 2 spaces, and I could hear them even through the glass, laughing. Dylan was holding my purse over his head like a trophy as he crossed the lot. They had driven 60 miles home, eaten, I found out later, a full dinner at a roadside place on the way, and then, somewhere around dessert, decided it would be even funnier to deliver my things at midnight and see my face. They knocked for 10 minutes. My mother called my name in the sing-song voice, the one from the platform. Ma-ra. Come on, sweetheart, it was funny. Dylan held his phone up to the peephole and played the video he had taken, and I could hear my own abandonment as a soundtrack through my front door, the horn honking twice, my mother singing, his laughter close to the microphone. I stood in my dark kitchen, 4 feet away, perfectly still, and did not open the door. There is a version of me that opens it. Even then, even that night, there was a version of me that opens the door and laughs it off and accepts the purse and lets the whole machine keep running. Because the machine was 33 years old, and it was the only family I had. I want to be honest and say I felt that pull, the gravity of it, one last time. It is the same gravity that keeps people in all kinds of rooms they should leave. Then my mother said, through 2 inches of door, to my brother, not to me. Well, she got home fine, didn't she? And the 2 of them laughed, and the gravity let go of me all at once. They left the purse hanging on my doorknob. My phone was inside it, 11 missed calls deep, all from the first hour when the joke still needed an audience. There was also the video sent to the family group chat where it had collected 14 laughing faces, including my aunt, including 2 cousins, including, and this is the one I keep, my godmother. They were still laughing when the ground moved. That is the sentence I come back to. Not one person in that car, in that group chat, in that warm-lit kitchen 60 miles away, had any idea that at 6:40 that evening, standing in the rain in a dress with no pockets, borrowing a stranger's phone, their daughter had quietly turned off the machine. The confirmations came by mail over the following week, the way banks still do it, 1 letter per account, 3 white envelopes with cellophane windows, scheduled transfer cancellation, effective immediately. I read each one at my kitchen table with my coffee, and I filed each one in the folder marked Whitfield, behind 5 years of highlighted statements, and I squared the stack and slid the drawer shut. The 1st of October was 19 days away. Here is what my family thought had happened in those 19 days. They thought Mara was sulking. That was the official story, and the campaign to manage it started within 48 hours, and I want to describe that campaign carefully because if you have a family like mine, you will recognize every move. First came Breezy. My mother left voicemails like nothing had happened, recipes she had seen, a neighbor's surgery, and then, at the end, lightly, like a hand patting a dog, and listen, sweetheart, about Sunday, you're not still being silly about the little train thing, are you? The little train thing. 60 miles, in the rain, the little train thing. When Breezy didn't land, she went to Wounded. The voicemail, I remember word for word, arrived on a Thursday. You're really going to make our anniversary about you? 35 years, Mara. Your father was so happy. You couldn't let us have one day. I sat in my office above the hardware store and listened to that voicemail twice, and I think that was the moment I understood the architecture of it, the way I had finally been moved into a load-bearing role in the family story too, not as the provider, as the problem. The day they abandoned me at a train station had become, in less than 2 weeks, the day I ruined their anniversary. Dylan's text ran simpler because Dylan never needed architecture. It was a joke, no punctuation then. Why do you always make things weird? Then a meme of a crying baby, and then, when none of it raised a reply, the one that told the whole truth by accident. Everyone says, overreacting. Everyone. The group chat had held a vote, and the woman who wasn't in the room had lost. That second Sunday, I did not go to dinner. I want that to sound bigger than it sounds, so let me give it scale. I had been to Sunday dinner at my parents' house every week, barring flu and 1 wedding, for 11 years. I had sat through 11 years of Dylan's stories and my mother's conducting and my own reliable role as the material. Skipping it felt physically strange, like a missed stare. I cooked for myself, and the food tasted like nothing in the quiet, and I sat with that. And somewhere around 7 o'clock, the phone began to ring because the empty chair had been noticed. My aunt called to say that family is family, which is a sentence that means whatever the family needs it to mean. A cousin texted to say she was sure they hadn't meant anything by it. The machinery of family guilt ground along, hour after hour, contact after contact, and I noticed, the way I notice things, that in all of it, every voicemail, every text, every relayed message, not one single person asked me what it had been like. Standing on the platform, watching the car shrink, not one of them asked. The closest anyone came was my aunt saying, "Well, you got home all right in the end," which was not a question and which I did not answer. They could not afford to ask, you see. Asking would have made it real, and it had to stay a joke, because if it was not a joke, then what was it? And who had been doing it to me, and for how long, and who had been laughing? I did not tell a single one of them what I had done. 19 days, and the 1st of October, coming like a train on a printed schedule, and I said nothing. People ask me if that silence was strategy. It was not. It was older than that. I had spent 5 years protecting their dignity in secret. It took me a while to notice that no one had ever once protected mine. The silence was just me, finally keeping a confidence for myself instead. The only person who saw anything was Carl Brennan, because Carl pays attention the way I keep books. I was at his shop that month doing the quarterlies, and he set a coffee next to my elbow and looked at me for a second too long. "You're quieter than usual," he said, "and you're usually a mime." I almost told him. The whole thing rose up in me, the platform, the singing, the phone call, the envelopes. Instead, I said something about a heavy month. And Carl, who is the only person in this story who ever read me correctly without needing the ledger, nodded slowly and let it be, and said on his way back to the counter, "Whatever account it is, kid, settle it properly." That night, I sat with my thumb over my mother's name and a reply half-typed. "I have spent 5 years," it began. I deleted it one letter at a time, watching each word disappear, and it felt like watching the tide take something I had built too close to the water. Then I set the phone face down and went back to work. Some debts you do not discuss with the debtor. You just stop extending the credit. On the last Friday of September, I closed the office early, went home, and laid the folder marked Whitfield open on my kitchen table. I had never done that before. 5 years of statements, and I had only ever added to that folder, 1 page at a time, the way you add to anything you are trying not to look at directly. That evening, I looked at it directly. I went through every page in order with a pencil and a legal pad, the way I would for a client, and I did the one thing I had never let myself do. I ran the total. $125,680. I wrote it at the bottom of the page in my own handwriting, and then I sat back and looked at it for a long time. Spelled out like that, in pencil, on a Friday night, at the same kind of kitchen table where my father had once done arithmetic that didn't work. It did not look like a little help. It looked like a down payment on a house. It looked like 4 years of college. It looked like a daughter, itemized. And here's the thing I had to decide that night. The real decision. The one nobody in my family knows was ever on the table. I could have warned them. The 1st of October was days away. 1 phone call, 30 seconds. "The mortgage draft isn't coming, Dad. You need to cover it," and the whole thing lands soft. They find out what I did, but as a courtesy, with time to move money, the way civilized people end an arrangement. I sat there with my thumb over his name, and I am telling you the truth when I say I wanted to do it. Not for them exactly, for the version of me that had spent 33 years being the responsible one. Warning them was in my blood the way the smile was. But I kept coming back to one fact, and the fact would not move. They had planned it for a week. There had been a group chat. There had been 7 days of my own family, the people whose lights I kept on, scheduling my humiliation between dinner reservations. Nobody had warned me. Nobody had sat at a kitchen table with their thumb over my name, agonizing. My mother had practiced the line, you could hear it in the singing, and my brother had charged his phone, and not one adult in that car had said, at any point in 60 miles, "Maybe this is cruel." Kindness in one direction only is not kindness. It is supply. Warning them would have been one more payment. I had made my last one, so instead of calling, I did what I do. I wrote it up. 2 pages, typed, dated, plain as an invoice. Every payment, every account, every month, from March of 2020 to September of 2025, with the total at the bottom and 1 sentence under the total. These payments have ended. No accusations, no inventory of 33 years, no mention of train stations, numbers, and a period. The truth, in my house, in my language. On the second page, because the records I keep go both directions, I listed the other ledger. Every loan my father had peeled off the clip for Dylan in front of an audience. Every co-signed mess and covered rent that had moved through that family while I watched. $21,500. None of it repaid. All of it. When you followed the water back uphill, mine. I read both pages twice, signed nothing, sealed them in an envelope, and put the envelope in the folder. Not to send, not yet. For whenever the question started. A bookkeeper knows you do not deliver the statement before the close of the accounting period. Then I switched off the kitchen light and went to bed, and I slept that night, better than I had slept in 5 years. People think decisions like this feel like fire. This one felt like the end of a quarter. Everything reconciled, nothing outstanding. The books for the first time in my adult life balanced. The 1st of October was a Wednesday. I have no idea how my parents spent it, and that is its own small miracle, because for 5 years I had known the financial weather inside that house better than they did. On the first Wednesday of October, the mortgage draft bounced 60 miles away, and I was at my desk above the hardware store, reconciling a restaurant's September, and I did not feel a thing. The machine they didn't know existed had simply not turned over, and the silence it made was, for a few days, too quiet for anyone to hear. The bank heard it first. Banks always do. A returned mortgage payment does not announce itself with trumpets. It comes as a line item and a fee and a polite letter. And my father, I learned all of this later from the one cousin who eventually chose me, stood in line at his branch with the letter in his hand, absolutely certain it was an error. That detail stays with me. He was certain. 5 years of payments he had never once checked the source of, and his first instinct, his bone-deep instinct, was that the floor he stood on was solid and the bank had simply miscounted it. The branch officer pulled the account history. And then that young man, whoever he was, had to do the thing nobody in my family had ever done. He had to look my father in the eye and tell him the truth about his own life. The mortgage drafts, he explained, had not come from my father's checking account. Not for years. They had come from an external account on an automatic schedule since March of 2020. The schedule had been canceled by the account holder in September. My father asked whose account. I have imagined the pause before the answer more times than I want to admit. The screen turned slightly, or it wasn't. I will never know. What I know is what the cousin told me, which is what my mother told her, which is that my father came home from the bank that day and sat in his car in the driveway for 45 minutes. And when he came inside, he did not say one word about it to anyone. For 6 days, my father, who could not carry the mortgage, carried the name of the person who had been carrying it for him, alone, in silence. I think those 6 days may be the only inheritance I actually wanted. The machine kept not turning over. The 5th came, and my mother's car payment did not go out, and the late notice followed. The 9th came, and the insurance premiums, house and both vehicles, did not renew, and the policy entered its grace period with a printed warning. Each envelope arrived at that house, like a stone dropped down a well nobody knew was under the floor, and somewhere in the middle of October, the splashes got close enough together that my mother picked up the phone. Her voice, when I answered, was one I had never heard from her. Careful. She was careful with me. 33 years I had waited for careful. She talked around it for a full minute, the weather, my cousin's wedding, and then she said there had been some kind of mix-up at the bank. Something to do with the house payment, and her voice put the next sentence on a tray and offered it to me. Your father thinks, she said, there's been a misunderstanding. There's no mix-up, I said. I stopped. 3 words, and then nothing. I stood at my office window, looking down at Main Street, and I listened to my mother's breathing change, and I want you to know exactly what was in that silence, because I have audited it many times. There was no confusion in it. That is the detail that matters. She did not say, stopped what? She did not ask, what are you talking about? The silence on that line was the silence of a person whose hands have known the shape of a thing her mouth has refused to name for 5 years. She knew. Underneath the jokes and the little help and the where did we get her, she had always known. And now the knowing was out of the drawer and on the table between us, itemized. When she finally spoke, she chose her side. She said, Your father's heart, Mara. If something happens to him, that's on you. I am told there are people whose mothers apologize. I believe it the way I believe in distant countries I have not visited. The statement's in the mail, I said, and ended the call. and mailed the envelope that afternoon. The family summit happened that Sunday. I was invited by group text, the first message that Chad had sent me since the video. Summoned, really. Dinner at the house, 6 o'clock. We will discuss this as a family. As a family. 5 years a furnace, 6 weeks a defendant. I replied with one line, "Everything you need is in the letter," and turned my phone face down and went on with my evening, and 60 miles away, the envelope did the only confronting I would ever do. The cousin, the one who chose me, was at that table, and she says it was Dylan who opened it, because of course it was Dylan, the family's master of ceremonies, reaching for the document like it was another bit. She says he started reading the first page out loud in a game show voice. She says the voice lasted 4 lines. Then the figures started landing, month after month after month in black ink, and the number at the bottom of the page is a number that does not have a funny voice. And my brother, for the first time in the recorded history of our family, went quiet in the middle of his own performance. The letter passed hand to hand around that table in silence. My mother read it and put it down and straightened it against the table edge. Twice, that smoothing motion of hers, like the paper could be calmed. My father never touched it. He had already read the whole thing standing at the mailbox 3 days before, the cousin says, and had carried it folded in his jacket since, telling no one. And then someone turned to the second page. The other ledger, Dylan's page, $21,500 of charm, itemized, and every adult at that table understood 2 things in the same instant. Where the family's money had actually come from all those years, and where it had actually gone, nobody laughed. It turned out I was the only one in that family who ever understood what a joke costs. What happened next happened slowly, the way weight works, and I watched almost none of it firsthand. I got it in pieces from the cousin, from overheard halves of phone calls, from the public record that small towns keep without meaning to. So this part of the story I will tell you the way it reached me. In fragments, like everything true, the boat trailer went first. My father had a fishing boat he took out 4 times a summer, the one from Dylan's canoe story, and one morning in late October, it was parked at the end of the driveway with a hand-lettered sign, and by the weekend it was gone. Then, the second car. My mother's sedan, the one whose payments had arrived from nowhere on the 5th of every month, was traded down to a 10-year-old hatchback, and the difference went to the bank. The house survived. I want to say that plainly because people who hear this story sometimes want the house to fall, and they are disappointed in me when I tell them I never wanted that, not once. The house survived on a refinance my parents signed in November at a worse rate, stretched out over years they had not planned to spend paying for anything. The bank this time checked where the money would come from. It would come from my father. He went back to work, 63 years old, and the distribution company's competitor took him on for warehouse shifts, the same work they had retired him out of, and the town saw him in that uniform. And I will tell you something now that I have never been able to explain to anyone. I am told by the cousin that he stood straighter in it, that he seemed, for the first time since the layoff, like himself. I think about that more than I think about almost anything else in this story. The little help had not only been holding up the house, it had been holding him under, somewhere he could not respect himself. And nobody had known that either, because nobody had ever once discussed what was actually happening. Even my kindness, run in secret, had a cost I never audited. I told you I would be honest in this story. That is the honest part. My mother ran one last campaign. She tried the old framing on her own sister. Mara overreacted to a bit of fun. You know how she is. And my aunt, the one who had been in the group chat, the one with the laughing face under the video, asked her one question. The cousin was in the kitchen and heard it. If it was a bit of fun, my aunt said, why are you refinancing your house? There is no answer to that question, and my mother did not find one, and the story died right there at her own sister's kitchen table. That is the thing about numbers, the reason I have given my life to them. Stories can argue with stories forever. Nothing argues with a number. Dylan's turn came at Thanksgiving, I'm told, when my father, for the first time in his life, asked his son for money, not as a bit at a barbecue. Across a quiet table, as one man to another, with the second page of my letter folded between them. $21,500, and my father asked for $200 a month, and my brother, the son of our family, the boy whose charm converted to everything, discovered in real time the difference between charm and credit. Charm is a currency accepted only by people who have not yet seen the ledger. He said he was a little short that month. Nobody peeled bills off a clip. Nobody applauded. His lease came up in the spring and was not renewed, and he moved 2 towns over to split a place with a friend. And the group chat, the cousin tells me, has been very quiet because the family's two best running jokes had always been Mara and money, and suddenly neither one of them was funny. And me? In the middle of all that falling weight, I drove back out to Millbrook Junction on a Saturday in November with an envelope of cash and the biggest bouquet the grocery store had. Pauline Mercer lived 4 blocks from the station in a small white house with a feeder full of finches, and she opened the door like I was expected, and she would not take the envelope. She took the flowers and waved the money off with a hand and fed me dinner instead. Pot roast at a kitchen table older than both of us, and we talked about her late husband and her garden and almost nothing about my family. And it was the best meal I had eaten in years. At the door, leaving, I tried to thank her for the platform, for the phone, for not asking questions in the rain, and she stopped me with a look. "I knew the minute you dialed a bank instead of crying," she said. "You weren't lost, honey. You were leaving." I cried the whole drive home, and it was not grief, or it was not only grief. Somebody had seen me. It had taken 33 years and a stranger on a bench, but somebody had finally watched what I did and understood, in real time, exactly who I was. The last fragment I will give you from that autumn is this one. The cousin sent it to me without comment, a photo taken from her car in early December dusk, my parents' street. My father standing at the end of his driveway in his work jacket, looking up at his house. The porch light is on in the photo. It is a completely ordinary picture, a man at the end of a driveway. And I have kept it because I know what he was looking at. He was looking at a house with its lights on, and for the first time in 6 years, every watt of it was his. I never wanted the house to fall. I wanted exactly what was in that photograph, and I had wanted it all along. For them to know what the light cost, that's all. For somebody to stand in the dark and the cold and look up at all that warmth. And no, I am not going to stand here and tell you it was all porch lights and pot roast. The winning part of this story you have heard. Now I owe you the bill because everything has one, and a bookkeeper who hides a cost from you is lying to you with arithmetic. Thanksgiving of 2025, I cooked the entire meal for one person. I want to be exact about this because it matters. I did not order takeout and watch television, which would have been sensible. I cooked the whole thing, the bird, the stuffing, the green beans with the fried onions my father likes, my grandmother's rolls that take 4 hours, all of it, in my small kitchen on Delancey Street, for a table set for one. Some of that was stubbornness. Some of it was a kind of test I was running on myself to find out which parts of the day I actually loved and which parts I had only ever endured. The answer surprised me. I loved the cooking. I had always loved the cooking. What I had endured was being the one carrying plates while the stories got told, and you cannot learn that, it turns out, until you hear what a holiday sounds like with the noise removed. It sounds like a radio in a kitchen. It sounds like your own knife on your own cutting board. It was not happiness, I will not call it that, but it was not loneliness either. It was quiet with the swelling gone down, and almost peace, and I sat with my one full plate and understood that I had spent 11 years of Sundays mistaking noise for warmth. But there were nights. I will give you the honest version. There were nights that winter when I reached for my phone to send my mother some small nothing, a recipe, a thing a client said, the reflex of 3 decades, and got as far as her name before I remembered that the road was closed. The missing did not ask permission. You do not stop loving people because you finally saw the invoice. That is the part nobody warns you about. The love keeps showing up for a while, like statements for an account you've closed, and you just have to keep filing them until they stop coming. In December, Carl finally asked. He set the coffee down, sat across from me, which he never does, and said, "All right, out with it. You've been balancing my books like they insulted you since September." I told him the whole thing in 4 sentences. My family left me at a train station for a joke. I had been paying their mortgage for 5 years. I stopped. They found out. Carl Brennan is not a man who performs his feelings. He looked at me for a long moment, and then out the window, at his trucks in the yard, and what he finally said, he said quietly, "I've got 3 kids. I'd crawl to any one of them before I'd take a dime they had to keep secret to give me." Then he tapped the desk twice with 2 fingers, which from Carl is an embrace, and said, "My kids should be half as loyal as you, and I'd never have charged them for it the way your folks did." That sentence rearranged something in me, because he was right, and the rightness cut both directions. What I had given was loyalty. What they had charged me for it was the whole bill. But I had let them set those prices, year after year, smiling. And a bookkeeper who lets a client run a tab like that has some questions to ask herself about why she needed the account so badly. I did ask them that winter, some in a counselor's office, some on long drives. People ask if I regret the phone call. I regret that it was the only language my family ever understood. I regret that I taught it to them. One silent transfer at a time, 5 years of lessons in the going rate for Mara. Those are different griefs, and I hold them in different hands. On New Year's Eve, I stayed in, and at midnight I was washing my one plate in the warm water, city quiet outside, somebody's fireworks going off 2 streets over, and I realized the year was ending without an apology in it. The whole catastrophe, the platform, the letters, the refinance, the silence, and not one of the 3 of them had ever said the word sorry. I dried the plate and put it away, and I remember thinking, all right, then we build without it. Some structures, you learn in my line of work, never get the cornerstone back. You shore them up some other way, or you take them down. I had not decided yet which one this family was. That was the truth of me at the end of that year, standing in my kitchen at midnight, solvent, steady, free, and not yet decided. The knock came on a Saturday in March of 2026, a little after 10 in the morning, and I knew it was him before I reached the door because it was a knock I had never heard before. Soft, 2 knuckles. The knock of a man who has practiced in the car. My father stood on my doormat in his work jacket, the warehouse one, holding an envelope with both hands the way you hold something at a funeral. And he had clearly written and abandoned several speeches on the drive over because what came out of him finally was just my name, not the sing-song. Nobody has ever said my name like that, before or since. Like it was a word he was reading closely for the first time. It's not much, he said, and held out the envelope. It's the first of a lot of them. I counted what you counted. Inside was a check for $300, and behind the check, folded in thirds, a sheet of yellow legal paper covered in my father's blunt pencil handwriting, and when I opened it at my kitchen table, I had to set it down and look out the window for a minute before I could read it through. He had done the arithmetic. My father, 63 years old, had sat somewhere with 5 years of his own bank statements the way I had sat with mine and reconstructed it, month by month. The first of the month, the 5th, the quarterly 9ths. His total was at the bottom in pencil, circled, and his total matched my total to the dollar, $125,680. You have to be a bookkeeper, maybe, to understand why that broke me open when the check could not have. The check was money. The page was work. He had gone and looked at every month of it, faced every line of it, the years of it, the size of what he had been standing on and joking about, and he had done it in his own hand without being audited into it. The letter I mailed in October was me, finally speaking my language to them. That yellow page was my father, learning the language so he could say one sentence in it. The sentence was the match in the totals. In my language, that sentence is, I love you, or at least I see you. They are closer cousins than people think. I made coffee. He sat at my kitchen table. In my small, bright kitchen, he had been inside maybe twice in 7 years, and he was awkward, and his work boots were too big for the room, and he asked me about my practice. And then, this is the part I did not see coming, he listened. He asked what reconciling actually means. He asked how I had landed the funeral home account. He asked, my hand to God, whether 22 clients was a lot in my field, and when I said it was, for one person, he nodded slowly at his coffee like a man reading a respectable number and said, your grandfather kept his own books for the farm. Whole family always thought that's where you got it. 34 years old, and it was the first I had ever heard of it. He did not ask me to come back to Sunday dinner. That, more than the check, more than the yellow page, is how I knew something real had changed, because the old machine would have needed me back at the table, smiling so the family story could heal over. He asked instead if he could come to me. Once in a while. Coffee, he said, or I could show him the office. He'd like to see the office. Your mother, he started, and then stopped and chose honesty. Your mother isn't ready. She thinks she's the one owed. He looked at me steadily. She's wrong. I've told her she's wrong. She needs to arrive at it walking, not be carried there. Dylan was not mentioned. Some pages stay blank and you learn to let them. I told him next month was next month and we would see. I promised him nothing past it. He nodded like a man accepting terms, fair terms, and finished his coffee, and at the door he shook my hand, which sounds cold to people from warmer families, and was not. We had never been a hugging family in the real moments, only the performed ones. The handshake was real. It is the most his hand has ever said to me. After his truck pulled out, I took the check and the yellow page and put them in the folder marked Whitfield, And then I did something I had not planned. I took the whole folder out of the desk drawer where it had lived for 6 years, in arm's reach, and moved it into a storage box on the high shelf of my closet. The statements, the cancellation letters, his page, all of it. Filed, complete, accurate, and closed. The desk drawer it left behind, I filled with seed packets for the window boxes, which is either a metaphor or just what was on the counter, and I have decided I don't need to know which. He comes by most months now. We are not healed, if that word even applies, and his checks will take a very long time to reach a number with that many digits, and we both know there are sums between us no check can touch. But in October, I did one more thing, and I want to leave you with it before I tell you what it all meant. I went to the station in town. On a Tuesday, I had no obligations, and I bought a ticket. South, a slow train, a window seat, a town on a lake I had always meant to see. No phone in a cup holder, my purse on my own shoulder, my jacket on my own arm. 60 miles and then 100 more, fields going gold out the window, and somewhere past the county line, I caught my own reflection in the glass, calm, paid in full, going somewhere I had chosen, and I thought about the question my family had asked the rain that night, the one they sang out a car window like the last line of a song. Let's see if she can find her way back. I did. Just not to them. Back to the woman who bought a ceramic bird with a year of milk money because she had it in her to love people at a loss, before anyone taught her that loving at a loss was her job. I found my way all the way back to her. It just turned out she didn't live where I'd been told. So that is my story. Before you go, let me say one thing straight to you. The way Pauline said it to me, no rain this time, no platform, just you and me. If you are the quiet one holding everything up, hear me. Put it down once. Not forever, not in anger. Once. And then stand still and watch carefully what happens, because you will learn everything you need to know in 30 days. The ones who love you will reach for you. The ones who loved the holding will reach for the weight. There is no third group, and the sorting is faster than you can imagine, and you cannot learn the results any other way, because the weight itself is what's been keeping everyone's hands too full to show you what they'd rather be holding. Your worth was never the load you could carry in silence. Whoever taught you that needed it to be true. It isn't. Love that has to be purchased monthly is not love, it is a subscription, and the people who value you will never need an invoice to find out what you were worth. My family found out what I was really worth. So did I. Only one of us was surprised. Thank you for listening to my story and for sitting with me all the way to the end of it. Wherever you are tonight, whatever you're carrying, I hope you put it down somewhere safe and see who comes. Take care of yourself, your load bearing. Make sure the ones you're bearing it for deserve the floor. Good night.